I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet. I'm here with the Golan. That's Golan Ramraz, the dude. We just couldn't get our times together today. And Golan, I think it's important to say, we're not making money off this. None of our goals is to be an influencer. We want people to take ideas that we have on this show and snag them, steal them, facts that they can then take out and beat people over the head with it, like that guy I was arguing on Truth with, or he was bringing up Tucker points. And one of the Tucker points he was bringing up, Golan, I'm not kidding, I don't know if you saw this discussion, he brought up all the people in the government that have dual citizenship, implying Israeli dual citizenship. So I said, can you name me one person in the cabinet, in the Senate, or in the House that has dual citizenship? And he said, well, I meant the whole government. And I was like, well, can you name me one person in the whole government who has dual citizenship? And he's like, well, I can't find it. It's censored, or it's not allowed to look. And I was like, well, again, you weren't able to name me a single one of them. And then
let me just make sure I understand, so the audience can hear it too. This guy came at you with an accusation about dual citizenships, but didn't know who had one, didn't know if any existed, and hadn't done any research on the topic?
Nothing. It was after I did that breaking news that Tucker is going to have Hitler on next week as a hologram. It was either that one or the one. It was either that one or the one before the denazification thing. Whatever it was set him off, and which I thought, but he was literally using Tucker points. And David brought up to me that I think he was using ChatGPT because it kept on giving me the thumbs up and the smiley face at the end of each one. But then the last one was the AIPAC. He starts getting into that AIPAC doesn't, and he wikis AIPAC just so people understand, which is a lobby in America that that lobbies for Israel, which is literally zero law against. So he sends me that the head of AIPAC, who was gone since 1974, I pointed out them. So I showed him what Google says. And then he said, he came back and I realized that wasn't ChatGPT. Go on, because he had no answer at that point. He was he wrote something. Well, since 2016, I don't trust anybody. So he was totally off point. And I wasn't trying to browbeat somebody or beat somebody up, but don't come at me. And as you said, with Tucker hoods, and then not expect me to fight back.
We don't have to get into answering that asshats stuff, but just want to point out, of course, there is no law against dual citizenship within the government. In fact, what they say is the oath of office is what matters, not the passport. And if you take an oath of office and then break it, sure, go ahead, arrest me, go ahead and try me. I have 3 passports. Oh my God, what is that guy going to do? Amazing. Maybe I'll go for a 4th, and that guy can think I'm a quadruple agent. I think that.
Well, then you're Ghislaine Maxwell's father.
Then Trump is probably in my files somewhere. I think that people like this are just looking for any excuse to say the word Jew, AIPAC, Israel, any of the Tucker buzzwords, as I like to say. AIPAC, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you told me he was asking why AIPAC doesn't register as a foreign entity or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And of course, AIPAC, not being a foreign entity, might be part of the answer to that question. It doesn't receive any funding from the Israeli government. Its board is not controlled by Israeli officials. It has literally nothing to do with any of that. It's not acting under direction or control as required by FARA. So not sure what he's asking about. It's like saying, why doesn't, the U.S. Olympic team have to register as a foreign agent? But good job, bro. Next time, you should use ChatGPT, because instead of Tucker points, then maybe you'll get a little bit more information. Not much more, but a little bit more.
The more you know by the Daily Cheat Sheet. I know that the more you know. But that's what we're dealing with, because when Tucker says it, it's the truth. But it goes to what Trump brought up today when he called a lot of people Panickins. And he wasn't just referring to the left. He was referring to people on the right that have panicked over Iran, panicked over tariffs. And he was essentially saying, we become a bunch of what's going on. And it's so fascinating that you go by Trump's track record and people still panic. And there you are. There we are.
Please, can you enlighten us? Why did he call them Panickins?
Okay, in an exclusive interview, Donald Trump for Breitbart defined the term he came up with, Panickins. When asked what he and his team at the White House mean when they rip worrywarts, freaking out during high-stakes political moments faced by the president and the nation. In some cases, they are good people and they really want the best and they want to do things, but I call them Panickins because maybe they're not smart because they're playing right into the enemy's camp 100%. Trump said in other types of cases, they really are panicked. They can't handle pressure. Both are sort of dangerous. So there you have it.
I love it. And this came about, I think, as one of the more recent examples of panic and strategy when the Texas Democrats fled to Illinois recently. I know we're going to talk about this, right? Some flew to New York, some flew to Massachusetts, but most to Illinois because they wanted to deny quorum. Basically, there was a GOP redistricting plan. And yes, it would add more House seats on the Republican side of the equation.
Six.
Six, thank you. I thought it was five. So, see, this is why you listen to the show. And so now these Texas Democrats that said, you know what, we want to try and deny quorum. We're going to get on a plane literally when we're supposed to vote, and we're going to fly to another state because that way they can't vote. So that's called stopping democracy from moving forward. That's called violation of oath of office. Speaking of violating the oath of office, they didn't have to have dual citizenship to pull this stupid plan, or as Matt Whitlock called it, cartoonishly dumb. Basically, the silliest story I've heard all day.
Well done. And one of the things I also want to say is that a lot of stuff that we talk about, sometimes we often talk about it for the first time on the show. Sometimes we'll talk about it before the show. But any ideas that we come up with are joint ideas. And I'm not just saying that because I think of most of them. And I'm trying to give Golan credit, but no, it helps to be able to talk to somebody about ideas because it helps you expand on said ideas. So one of the things I was playing with, and I had sent you a message over the weekend talking about Stockholm syndrome, and you weren't 100% sure because sometimes when I text, I do shorthand thinking everybody knows what I'm talking about, and I've realized nobody ever knows what I'm talking about. But I want to bring up something because there's a term that's often thrown around, which is Trump derangement syndrome, TDS. And we know this is something real, but there also is an actual psychological term for this. We just never witnessed it go on. It's such a grand scale, an epic scale, which is called mass hysteria. It's also known as mass psychogenic illness, a phenomenon where a large group of people experience similar physical or psychological symptoms without any identifiable medical cause. Does that not sound like
Yeah,
it, Golan?
I think it does. This is by the way, this is why I love Judah. He will send me these texts and I'll be like, okay, I guess we're getting into psychology today. So this is, I think, a very clear parallel to what we see with Trump derangement syndrome. And people who watch this show know I am probably, of the three of us, I'm probably the largest critic of Trump. I actually think that there's been very little to criticize lately, but I'm the guy that if someone's going to go hard, it's going to be me. I have never had the kind of knee-jerk reaction to anything that he has done or said. I'm judging based on policy. I'm judging based on history. I'm judging based on facts on the ground. What so many people do is they have to ignore all of those things. They have to ignore facts. They have to ignore history. They have to ignore actual policy because they're just looking for a way to vilify. Now, for a long time, I thought that was just because they wanted him to be a bad guy. And slowly but surely, I realized it's not something they want. It's something they can't get past. They have developed an idea of who this person is in their head. And no matter what information you give them, no matter how much you refute whatever they have already ingrained with facts and information, even if you're looking at evidence and everything else, they cannot get past it. The derangement is real. Many years ago, I was in university and I took a philosophy class. And in that philosophy class, one of my favorite classes I've ever taken, really expanded the way I think about the universe. I remember at one point the teacher said, how do you know anything around you is real? And I'm like, well, we all can agree on it. And he said, well, what if that is mass delusion? What if everyone agrees on something that isn't there? And I was
Like that Twilight Zone episode. Remember that famed Twilight Zone episode with the plane?
100%. Yes, absolutely. 100%. And so that's what this feels like. When I talk to people who have, and there's no other way to put it, Trump derangement syndrome, and they are ranting and raving about things that I know not to be true. And I don't mean because of my opinion. I mean because I've either seen it or I've seen the full context or whatever. I know it's not true. So I think, okay, that person just wildly, okay, they're wildly left or whatever it is. Then I move to person number two. And they say the same thing verbatim. This is a mass hysterical phenomenon in which so many people have had the exact same thing come out of their mouth, and none of it is real. It's fascinating to me.
Well said. It's fascinating and it's scary. It's because I use that same word, and I think frightening is much more apropos than fascinating. In the beginning it's fascinating, and then you're like, holy crap.
Look, at this point, I'm way more scared about the mass hysteria towards the Jews because that's a group that they can try and exterminate and have tried for, hundreds of years. With Trump, what are they going to do? Try and put him in jail again? Okay, he's the president again. Now the Supreme Court gave him at least some kind of immunity, the same immunity Obama's going to get if the Russian collusion case turns out to be true, and we'll see what happens there. He feels safe to me. Now, what does that mean for the liberals? What does that mean for the future of America? Different conversation.
But again, let's get back to the Stockholm syndrome, because this is where they combine. Woke culture was a blend of Stockholm syndrome. And when people are not familiar with Stockholm syndrome, it came up in 1973, or a bank robbery where people started sympathizing with the people that robbed the bank. Hence the Stockholm syndrome. And it's built on fear. It's built on you instill fear into people, into the captives, and they end up sort of identifying with the captor. Woke, everything that was brought about by Me Too was there to instill fear. No different than what Nazi Germany did, right? Instill fear in the people. And eventually those said people will become so scared that they need to psychologically, and you could read the whole thing on it, they need to psychologically then identify with those that held them captive. I don't believe everybody that's left or in cancel culture wants to be there, go on. But they're at a place because of the mass hysteria and Trump derangement syndrome combined with Stockholm syndrome. You're talking about a very sick group of people, my friend.
And the thing about Stockholm syndrome that's really interesting is that for a long time, before I had studied it, which I have, for a long time, I thought it just meant in the moment. I thought, when the guy broke into the bank, he held these people, I think it was 6 people, 4 people, I can't remember, I think 6 people, in a bank vault at gunpoint for days. And they all started like really relating to him and working on his side. And I thought in the moment, then they get out and they're like, man, the fog is cleared, everything's okay. But no, Stockholm syndrome is insidious. Stockholm syndrome embeds itself within your mind. It's like a mind virus. Because let's use that exact case, the Stockholm case. After that, when he finally was caught and he was put on trial, those people refused to testify against him and then raised money for his defense. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I only did a little bit of thank you.
This is a long lasting syndrome. This is something that years later, they still think that guy had the best of intentions. And it's like, how?
What do you mean, like setting up bail funds for people
They
like
literally set up money
no,
for
no,
his
but
defense.
like during BLM? You mean something sort of similar like that?
Nice parallel. Nice parallel. And you know what? Let's look. I think that when you look at what liberal policies have done to the United States, and I'm talking about whether it's the border, whether it's the economy, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's inflation, whether it's getting injected with vaccines that turned out later not to be so up and up and everything else. The people who are still supporting, or like for instance, the number of reformed Jews who are supporting Mamdani, this
Yeah.
uses as an example, like there's 1,000 examples that's currently going on politically in America. The fact that all those people are like held captive by their ideals. In this case, if I am to have my liberal bona fides, my leftist bona fides, I must say okay to every crazy thing I've ever heard from that side. By the way, there are liberal ideals that I believe in. But if you said to me, also, I want you to chop your son's dick off, I'd be like, I think you may have done one step beyond. And then if you're like, also, can you support a jihadi running New York with the biggest Jewish population outside of Israel? Is this a joke? Is Ashton going to come out? Am I being punked? Like at a certain point, I have to say no, but they don't. That is a perfect example of Stockholm syndrome. They are willing, as I said during our last show, to place their head gently into the guillotine because they must adhere to the doctrine. That is a perfect example of being ideologically captured by your hostage taker.
Perfect. Absolutely brilliantly done. The reason why I brought this up and started thinking about this over the weekend and why I sent you that was because obviously what's going on in Israel, and obviously the photos of, I'm going to say this and I don't really care. You have two parallel photos that come out of starving. Obviously, the New York Times had that fake piece, but even take that to the next step. We keep on hearing about starving people in Gaza go on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at all the food lines, I don't see starving people. I see people wanting to get food. Lift up the shirts. I want to see starving. Okay. And I'm being dead serious. I'm being dead serious. I mean, I know that sounds, lift up your shirts. I want to see because listen, they're master class, Hamas and these people at the art of manipulation, just like Goebbels, master class. Lift up your shirts. And they were winning, Golan. They were winning and still are in that way. But then they released the videos horrifically of the two Israelis that are being held captive. And then we saw starvation. And then we saw who they are. And I'm sure those world leaders at that point, they didn't condemn it right away, but they must have been saying to themselves, what the F did we just do?
Not only that, but the media and, of course, all politicians worldwide that are either taking money from Qatar or just anti-Semitic or whatever it is that have been blasting in the, supporting the evil rapist terrorists up until now. They're doing everything they can to ignore the images you're talking about. Like you said, I'll be kind like you. Let's put aside the picture of Muhammad with cerebral palsy and hypoxemia. It's not a fake photo. The photo's real. The story behind the photo is totally fake. By the way, as men mentioned, I got fooled by a photo. You want to hear this? I was looking at so many fake photos that are out there, but I did see there was a picture of a little girl pushing her face through a fence. Remember, I said on the previous program, I don't even understand how it's possible for this kid to be there, because the GHF, which is the organization handing out food in Gaza now, is operating outside of population centers. And only, according to all the experts, only adult age men can make it to these places, especially with Hamas trying to kill them along the way. And so there are no women and no children. So the GHF actually started doing women only days and then moving it to an area that was closer. So I was like, wait, but how did that kid? Turns out Mend was absolutely right. That picture was of a Yazidi girl from a totally different conflict in a totally different part of the world. And the other picture that I saw that I suspected was fake turns out also not Gaza, also not 2025. So let's put all of those aside and just talk about the photos that you're referencing, the photos of Rom Braslavsky and Eviatar David. Okay, David. Okay, the two hostages that they just released these propaganda videos of, these gaunt, emaciated men that have clearly not been given food. If you've seen any of the breakdowns of the videos, you see the Hamas operative's hand come in, this thick, meaty arm that clearly has been fed incredibly well. And of course, the claim in the video, everyone knows these hostages are just reading the scripts that are being handed to them. All the released hostages have said that we have to learn our lines. It's very, very specific for propaganda purposes. So we know we can't trust a word that's being said, not because we can't trust the people, but we can't trust the words. And we can see in the video, he says, I'm eating what they're eating. So there's no food here. Everyone's starving. So I'm starving too, as if it's this parallel thing. And then a hand comes in of this fat ass handing him a can of beans that's supposed to last for 2 days. So we know it's all a lie. But here's the interesting part. What did the media do with those photos? Remember, this is just a day or two after they put on the front page of everywhere, including the New York Times, the fake out of context photo of the cerebral palsy Muhammad kid. What did they do with these videos, these photos of this crazy, terrible videos and photos that came out of these two hostages?
Digging his own grave.
I didn't even get into the details of the videos, but yes, one of them is literally digging his grave and saying to the camera, I'm digging my own grave because I don't have much longer. The other guy too also said the same thing, Ram. So it said the same thing, but without the actual digging kind of propaganda part of it. So NBC News, did they print, after putting the fake picture on the cover, did they print the story? They said, this has been revealed to us, but we can't independently verify the video. And therefore, now, of course, Hamas inflated death tolls. No problem. Baseless massacre claims, they don't even say anymore from Hamas run, Gaza Health Ministry. No quote marks, no disclaimers, just headlines. No problem. No problem. Pushing everything. Here, we can't independently verify it. So we're going to head and put that aside. New York Times, you think they did it? Or Washington Post, after they both had pushed the other photos to the front page? Post, my blood is boiling as I tell you this. The Post, and I quote, didn't even consider the video newsworthy enough for a standalone story, mentioning the videos of the hostages only in passing in coverage about U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's visit to Israel. That's the only time it was mentioned. Okay, and that comes from Honest Reporting, who broke down the media's complicity in not telling this story, and the New York Times just ignored it. They couldn't even be bothered to write about it. They put a photo up of someone that wasn't even the guy. It was just his relatives. And then they mentioned something within the story. So BBC, they didn't call them hostages. They called them prisoners. I could go on and on and on because all of them did it. So yeah, if you want to talk about how Stockholm syndrome works, the first thing is we have to relate to our hostage takers, relate to our terrorists. And here, the terrorists are the media too. And all those people who are religiously reading their newspapers, it's just another arm of Hamas as far as I'm concerned.
Especially so, well, there's two different cases of it going on right now. So let's say in a place like Israel, right, where this is absolute psychological warfare, and no, Israel is not identifying with Hamas by any means, but they are that fear thing does kick in even to Israelis, where you're not identifying with your captives, but you've become a captor. And that's what BB is trying to break them out of, is stop being a captured. You're not captured. You're here, you're safe, you're free. They're captives. But they know when they release these videos, and there was a story that, Republicans, it was reported on PBS. This is another funny thing from Truth, where Trump supposedly shed a tear, and he came out supposedly and he said, "Get everybody, just get all the hostages out and just go destroy them. Well, you have all of our backing."
As
And
after he
somebody,
watched the Abiatar David video. Yeah.
yeah, and somebody said Trump doesn't shed tears. Like, I'm like, well, he's not human. And I was just thinking, my response to them, this is the same person that called up Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, for every week for the first 11 months after his wife died. This is the same person that we know has done countless humanitarian things, countless. But the people of Israel right now are in fear, and I don't blame them. I cannot blame them. But at the same time, you're not captured, and Bibi has to try to do this message. The second thing, and I'll let you riff on this, is the reason I sent you the message about the Stockholm syndrome is because when you look at all these European countries that have been invaded by Islam, right? They've been
Mm-hmm.
invaded by Islam and all want to recognize a Palestinian state. It's because at that point they have full blown Stockholm syndrome. As I pointed out, that girl on X, that when she X that time, and as my father pointed out, you're talking about second generation. You're talking about generations now of Muslims in these countries. When they put that mat ad on the ground like a dog owning their territory and marking their territory, these people in France, we think it's sometimes to win elections. What if they're scared shitless of the Muslims in their own country?
Shouldn't they be?
Yeah.
I mean, when you see someone who is supposedly just exercising their right of religion, but instead of doing it within the house of religion or within their own home, they instead take their prayer mat and put it in the middle of the street on the tram tracks, so the tram has to stop, and that's where they do their praying. It's not because they're trying to praise Allah, as you mentioned. It's them marking their territory like a dog, like an animal. They're saying, "You can't stop me. I control this. You are at my whim here." And they should be afraid, because what happens when you do push back? I mean, as an example, if you were to, I don't know, draw a cartoon of Allah or Muhammad, what happens, Judah? I'll use Charlie Hebdo. I'll do 1,000 of them. The rule is you are not allowed to draw Allah or Muhammad. You are not allowed to make fun of them in any way. And if you do, the sentence is death. Okay, it's the same reason why Salman Rushdie has a jihad declared fatwa declared, excuse me, a fatwa declared on his head, and it's the same reason why, after years and years of having constant 24/7 security around him, he finally was stabbed in the face. Right, and it's the same reason why Charlie Hebdo in France, the satirical magazine, was shot up by another one of these Muslim fanatics. And yeah, this. So what happens when you push back against Muslims? You don't get a strongly worded letter. You don't get a Karen asking to talk to the manager. What you get is a Muhammad trying to murder everybody. So that's called Muslim rage. And Stockholm syndrome here, it's not just a metaphor, right? In many places, we're going to use Sweden as the example because it is so overrun, but it is a national policy there. The entire country, politicians included, are so paralyzed by fear. And obviously, we're seeing this happen in France as well. I could give you a number of countries. We're just going to use Sweden as the example because I happen to have those numbers in my head. But everybody is so scared of either Muslim rage or being canceled because, yeah, that's spread all over the world. So being called racist, that they are straight up defending their own abusers. Sounds familiar, sounds like Stockholm syndrome. And it's the exact same thing. Instead of confronting this Islamist psychosis and forget anti Semitism, anti Semitism is just part of it. They want the entire world to be Muslim. They call it a caliphate. Look it up if you don't know. CALIPHATE. This is something that they want everybody to be under their sword. As men pointed out, that's why all of their flags have swords on them. And it's also why the numbers for Islam exploded over the last who knows how many hundreds of years, because every time they went in and colonized and conquered, which is what they have done, they are the most colonizing force in the history of the world. They didn't do what like the Romans did, where they still let you, okay, you could be a Jew, just do it quietly in your corner and pay a fine. They basically put a sword to your throat and they said, you either convert to Islam or we cut your head off. And so everybody suddenly became Islamic. And then that perpetuated over time. So if you're terrified of Muslim raid, then you muzzle pro West and pro Israel and pro America and even pro Swedish voices. The silence doesn't buy safety, though. It invites in that chaos. It invites in all the extremism, all the propaganda to fill the void of what should be you pushing back against this sort of thing. And last thing I'll say is when your survival strategy is submission, you don't just lose the moral high ground. Okay? You lose everything. Your appeasement dressed up as compassion basically means that you fall victim.
Well, I think that's brilliantly said, and I think you could make two strong comparisons because Bibi and Trump are very similar like this. Is they truly understand this concept. Like two world leaders we're not going to see for a long time, and two world leaders we haven't seen in a long time. And they understand this. I mean, Trump truly understands this concept. And that's why today he announced that any state that decides to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel will lose federal funding. He sees what's coming. He knows exactly what's coming. And U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, today was in Israel, or yesterday at least, and he said, the West Bank belongs to Israel. And
Well, we don't call it the West Bank on this show, do we?
right,
We call it Judea and
and
Samaria because
Samaria,
that's the
right.
actual, just for our audience, the reason why it has become known as the West Bank, and people have continued to proliferate that. And by the way, we fall into that trap because it's said so often. We say it sometimes, and we have to remember that's not what it is. Why? That's the West Bank of Jordan. What they're doing once again is erasing Israel's history in the same way that the UN tried to do with the Western Wall, and they tried to do with parts of Jerusalem, and they tried to do with basically all of Israel, erasing the indigeneity of the Jews there. That's the reason why they call it the West Banks. If any of you do support Israel and any of you do support reality, Judea and Samaria is the name, not the West Bank. Sorry, Judah, continue.
No, no, well said. But I think that to the bigger point that Bibi came out today, Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, came out today and said, "Well, we're taking a full ground operation tomorrow." And there's not a doubt in my mind that the video when Trump saw it, and Bibi sees what's happening with his people because of this video, the fear that they are putting on his people, and Bibi said that's enough. And people keep on saying, and I had this phone conversation with somebody earlier today, people keep on saying, well, why is this taking so long? You got to remember the first year and a half, Biden was hampering them at every move. Trump's been in office for 6 months and a lot has gotten done. You had hostages released right away. You had a certain bunch of stuff come up. But Bibi realizes if he doesn't act now, he loses control of the population. And on Friday's show, remember what I said? I'm not saying this to be right. I said Bibi that Israel has 72 hours. And God bless Donald Trump. God bless that man because he has used every amount of political capital that he has. So when we're talking about this syndrome, we're not only talking about with people on the left, there are people on the right that are abusing this syndrome, like the Marjorie Taylor Greens,
Absolutely.
like the Tucker Carlsons, like the Candace Owens and Steve Bannons, and the list goes on to take advantage of this syndrome when they're witnessing it to say, let's capitulate.
It's interesting because all of those people claim to be America first. They, of course, that's what they put in their bio and their whole reasoning for being anti-Semitic, excuse me, anti-Zionist, whatever, is that they're saying, well, why would we have to help an ally? We only should help ourselves. Money should only stay internally. All of that. So what they're saying is, let's not think about everything else that's happening in the world. Which, let's, by the way, they're wrong, but let's pretend they're right. Let's be kind and say they're absolutely right. No other place should even be thought of. If it's not America, we don't even know what's happening. We got blinders on. And, if the house next door is on fire, we don't call the fire department, even though it might spread over here because that is not our house. So F everybody else. Okay, sure. Sounds brilliant. But let's assume they're right. Why then do we have to go negative? Why do we have to try and hurt our allies? That's not America first. That's like going into the negative space. So either you're saying ignore it completely and let them do their thing. If they're going to fight, let them fight. It's their problem. It's their problem. But then for you to also complain about them fighting, for you to also perpetuate myths about the war, that means you are not following what you are telling everybody else you claim to be about, right? That loyalty oath you're talking about, that means I'm only going to handle America. Okay. So what if the BDS movement has nothing to do with Israel? What if the BDS movement has to do with Jews? And what if the Jews in America are targeted? American citizens are targeted as a result of BDS. So now, if it's not about Israel, are we allowed to do something about it? Federal dollars are not a free lunch. They come with conditions all the time, right? So civil rights laws came with conditions. Anti-discrimination laws came with conditions. Anti-terrorism laws, et cetera, they came with condition. So him saying, if you bankroll Jew hatred, you don't get FEMA aid. That's not a loyalty oath. That's about moral clarity. If BDS is a hate campaign that seeks to destroy the only democracy in the Middle East and hurts American Jews as a result, why should U.S. taxpayers subsidize states that promote that kind of garbage? And one last thing. Right now, there are no states. There are politicians here and there, but there are no real states that are BDS, pro BDS. But this is also Trump shooting a bullet across the bow of New York. You want to hire Mamdani? You want to hire this guy who is pro jihadi, who is pro Hamas, who is pro BDS. He talks about it all the time. This is not, you don't have to look for the subterfuge and the subtext. He says it very blatantly. Be aware, if you vote this in, you are voting in you losing FEMA aid. FYI.
I think it's brilliantly said and brilliantly put, and I think he's doing the same thing with shooting the arrow at certain people in our own party when he calls them Panickins. He knows exactly who he's talking about, and the people that are hearing it know exactly that he's talking to them, and they're going to have to make the decision. Trump has who Trump has. This is his last term. I mean, I know people go joke around with it being his third term, but Trump's not going down as a capitulator. I could guarantee everybody of that, and I just think it's his world leadership, as I brought up the other day with Marco Rubio being the greatest Secretary of State of a generational type thing, there's only going to be one Trump, well above Reagan, well above anybody that I could think of in the last 100 years of what he's doing and what he's done. And this just broke, by the way, so I just want to get to it. Greg Abbott actually put out arrest warrants for everybody that evade all the people in the Texas legislature that left. So there, you need a certain amount of people to vote, just so people understand. You need, I think it's like 150 people to vote on something. So 100 of them exited the state. So he just put out an arrest warrant on all of them.
That's amazing. I love that. But there should be consequences to this sort of thing. If your job is to govern, if your job is to help make laws, if your job is to vote on things, then why would anyone object? Maybe you become a hero. Maybe you become, to use their terminology, a martyr. Maybe you're the guy who gets to be Saint Asshole because now you screwed up the democratic process. A number of episodes ago, we were talking about what would have happened if it had been revealed who actually leaked the Supreme Court decision
Yeah.
on Roe v. Wade. That guy, even if he'd gone to jail, he would have come out of jail and been a hero. He would have been given his own show on MSNBC. He would have been hailed. And that's the same thing here is these guys are going to skip work, run away, not do their job, not enforce the law. And Greg Abbott saying, okay, time for there to be consequences.
Now, I love it too, and I also love that Pam Bondi is putting together a grand jury for the Russia hoax. So she's
Yeah.
actually getting into action, and they're actually this should make people in MAGA. It's like interesting because I was talking to my friend on the phone. It's like, Trump ran on two things essentially. He really did: trade and the border, right? Money, security. Nothing else was on the docket. But we did want to find out certain things. Of course, that was a win if he won and appointed the right person, and he has. And Pam Bondi, I think she's doing a fantastic job other than the PR mistakes go on. So I think I'm not going to criticize her for whatever. I mean, you made a mistake, but your thoughts on that? I think it's great.
I think this is the smart idea because in the end, you pointed something out, and I think men supported this as well. We all kind of chatted about it. The idea is transparency, right? The idea
Yes.
is if it's true, and I happen to be in the camp that believes it is, that there's no there, that they did an investigation. That, by the way, the Biden administration did an investigation as well and found nothing to release to the public. And now this administration did an investigation, and remember, it was something they wanted to do. They wanted to find people. And I heard like Bill Maher, for instance, was saying, oh, the reason why Biden didn't release it is because Clinton was in it. The reason why Trump didn't release it is because Trump was in it. It's like Trump knew he was in it before. We all knew Trump was in it before they started the investigation. So I don't think any of these accusations hold water. I think there's no there. I think there is no mythical list. I think there is no proof of him doing this on behalf of anybody else. As we talked about, Maxwell's conviction had to do with Epstein himself and her finding chicks for him, and that's it. There was no co-conspirators and weird lists and everything else. So I happen to think there's no there. But the transparency is what's important, especially after the PR missteps. So if they can say, look, we're doing an investigation, and Tulsi says, here's some information about it, and then Bondi says, here's a grand jury about it, and at the end, there still may be nothing there. I happen to think, unfortunately, right, that no amount of red meat is going to sate the animals that are looking for,
Well, because it's
their
money.
conspiracy
Because
theories.
it's money to them. That's plain and simple. And that's why I started the show by saying we're not charging, we're not making money, is because we're just speaking what we think is the truth. We're not trying to grift you, and that's never our plan. But that is how grifters survive. Is they need listen. This isn't a new thing, Golan. I bring this up with Bill Kristol and the Weekly Standard or National Review, whichever putz of a paper. These people for 30 years made money on the Clintons are going to be caught next week and all the. I mean, that's how they made their money. That was that's how they got donors. That's everything these groups did. And like another. So it's a never ending cycle. The grift didn't just start yesterday. The
It's
grift
true. And by the
continues.
way, the way the media is framing this, depending on, of course, what side you're reading, I like to read both sides because I want to be informed. And what I notice, and by the way, there was a lot of the time that I would read lefty sources and be like, there's some interesting pieces of information here that I can yank. Lately, and not even like it's been a while, I'm just finding nothing. I'm just finding nothing but pure propaganda. Like what's going on with the New York Times, like what's going on with the Washington Post. I know I've used it before, but the Daily Beast has become just like the National Enquirer level version of reporting, where, for instance, with this Bondi thing, instead of saying Trump orders Bondi to unseal the Epstein grand jury transcripts or Bondi is continuing to pursue the case or whatever, the way they frame it is there was an expose, and then Trump was forced to say this. And now Bondi saying this blows up Trump. This is actually a headline that they had. I'm paraphrasing. Blows up Trump's claim that the Epstein files don't exist. Like, oh, now we'll know the truth. Everything they're doing is just the same bullshit propaganda narrative that is meant to twist the reality to fit in to whatever it is that these influencers, these grifters and charlatans are trying to make money off of.
Just want to bring up something very quickly before I get into the Brazil. Thousands rally in 62 cities to thank President Trump for supporting Bolsonaro. And
Bolsonaro.
Bolsonaro, there's actually a sign, "Thank you, President Trump, for defending Brazil from this dictatorship." So it's just like everything else spreads, hope Trumpism spreads. Because I was going to say, there's a very famous picture when the Oslo Accords happened, and both Arafat and Rabin were talk about Oslo when they were standing on stage, and Rabin had an even more constipated look than he had in the past of just being sick. And when you look at Starmer and Macron, and you look on these people's faces, they do look like captives. Go on, they really do look like they're prisoners
Goes
in
back
their
to
own.
our Stockholm syndrome
Yeah, I'm
conversation,
saying, but I
doesn't it?
was going back. I was just going back to with Stockholm syndrome. They really, I just for some reason the image just came to my head of when they speak and when they come out and what they say. They really talk like the scripts that the prisoners that the hostages are reading off of. They're reading off a hostage prompter script.
So there was a situation that's a little different, but I love this as a parallel to this. There was a situation with the quote unquote documentary film No Other Land, the so-called documentary film that won the Oscar last year, which was just basically fiction, just one of the worst examples of misinformation that's ever been put on film, and it won a documentary Oscar, which basically calls into question everything you've ever known about the Oscars, if you ever trusted them, which I never did. But the Academy basically decided hands off. They didn't want to get into the politics of it. And then one of the directors was arrested. Of course, he was arrested, as we've seen from the released videos, for throwing rocks and for inciting violence. And then he was arrested. And of course, just like Greta Thunberg, he said, I was kidnapped by the Israelis, which is like, do we know what arrest is anymore? Do we just using the word kidnap now whenever we want to vilify the Jews? Anyway, he said, I was kidnapped. And so everybody came out. All Mark Ruffalo and all of his shithead patrol came out to say, no, this guy is being persecuted and art shouldn't be persecuted. And then the Academy didn't say anything. And so they got to keep the news cycle going for a while by then making up that story, of course. And then the next story about him being kidnapped, which he wasn't, being released. Then they got to have another news cycle because they said, now we want all these artists to sign a petition saying the Academy should speak up about this, about how this artist is being silenced. And the Academy finally, after a while being like, we don't really get involved with this stuff, they finally released a statement. And the statement was, of course, capitulation. Yeah, nobody should be silenced, and artists and the Israelis shouldn't do this and whatever. And the way they read the statement was exactly like I kept saying, why aren't they holding up a newspaper to show us today's date? It was a hostage video, 100%.
This is when I always like say to people, it's like keep your eye on the prize, like, focus, because we don't need so much exterior crap that takes away from it. Always was my biggest resentment about the 2020 elections was because I thought the case could be made by the numbers. Like if anybody were to listen to The World According to Ben Stein, was the case could be made by the numbers. We didn't have to go into quack space. All we had to look at was actual numbers and the impossibilities of those numbers, to the amount of votes, to the just everything. So it's like just focus, laser focus. Look at their faces, look at their actions, look at what their countries are going through right now. You're talking about prime ministers, and Macron's really a prime minister in name only because he had to get all those other groups because the right had beat them. And God bless people like Gert Wilder. God bless him. God bless people like Congressman Mike Davis, who I constantly see on Truth Social. But my favorite crazy thing of the weekend, which is what you sort of brought up, was that jackass Pierce Morgan saying how come all my Israeli guests are so quick to verify that this video is true, but they always deny the other stuff that comes out of Hamas. Are you like that? It might have been the dumbest statement of the year award.
This is, by the way, Piers Morgan has just turned into Dave Smith. Let's be real. He has nothing of value to say. He has been for a while someone who has pretended to say, I want dialogue. I want there to be a back and forth. But of course, he brings on the most psychotic people, people who are just the Jews, I mean, in this case, who are just hungry for their moment of fame and are going to say the stuff that's never going to help Israel out. And whenever he brings on someone like a Natasha Osdorf or someone like that, who actually is going to intelligently explain a case, he just interrupts them constantly and insults them and doesn't let them get a word in edgewise. So the other guest doesn't even have to debate them in any way, shape, or form. So he's been that person for a long time that keeps inviting the Nazis on the show and then thanking them for being a part of the conversation. The interview he just did on trigonometry was fascinating because it was exactly how propaganda works and exactly how gaslighting works. There's a video that's circulating on the internet now breaking down his answers into the actual stages of gaslighting and propaganda.
I'm not as familiar with it. I've watched it a couple of times. Did they actually call him out? Because other that's worth listening
You
to.
mean on the show?
Yeah.
So look, Kissen does a good job of pushing back on some things. I don't think he pushed back as much as he could. The thing about Kissen is interesting. He's a Jew, but I believe he's Jewish. Konstantin Kissen is his name. He is not necessarily like an outspoken ally or pro-Israel or pro-Zionist or anything like that. The thing he is honest, moral, and moved by facts and figures. And so accidentally, this guy becomes pro-Israel because the facts, the figures, morality is all on the side of the Jews and all on the side of Israel. The only way you can believe otherwise is to have swallowed the propaganda or to just hate enough to just make shit up like Pierce does. Pierce says, I don't know if they actually knew. So he right away says, I'm not an expert. That same thing that Dave Smith does, right? He says, but my opinion is, and then he changes the terminology. I know genocide means this, but I think it also could mean it doesn't. And then he changes it. So this is literally, go find this video on the internet. I'll try and put it up on our Instagram page, but it literally breaks down how his use of the actual stages of gaslighting and propaganda are at work in this video. And everything he says, like you said, it's not just dumb, because dumb is one thing. When he is asking those questions, he's just asking questions, which he says over and over again during the interview. I'm not saying, I'm just asking questions. He says it over and over again. But that's not an accident. That's not because he's a moron. That's because he is trying very carefully to parse his words in a way that allows his anti-Semitism, his Jew hatred, and his anti-West sentiment, and of course his grifterdom to happen without him being accused of such things, because he's so careful in how he parses his words. That's what's happening there.
100%. And I think what we're witnessing around the world is you're witnessing a thing of twofold. So you're witnessing of, obviously, like we brought up, Stockholm syndrome, and when you mix it with latent anti-Semitism and then it gets fueled by the internet, it has absolutely just obviously exploded. So the people out there that are listening, don't fall for it. I know
Well,
it's
and you know, I forgot to mention that you went into Piers Morgan, but I forgot to say that when you look at like the Macrons and the Starmers and all these guys, they're all political hostages. They really are. I think you've nailed the explanation. They are held captive by not just domestic Palestinian pressure, but I think you're right. I think it's also the fear that comes with what happens if we go against this group. There is a video I will never forget. Early on, post October 7th, it's in the UK, it's in London, and a bunch of vets were standing by and watching these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, anti-Jewish march go by, and there are Palestinian flags everywhere. And one of the vets, this older guy, goes and hangs a UK flag up, the Union Jack. And one of the cops goes, "Whoa, what are you doing? You're not allowed to do it." He takes it down, and the guy goes, "What are you talking about? This is the UK." And he goes, "Yeah, but it could inflame tensions with the people who are marching." And
yeah.
he goes, "What are you talking about? They got Palestinian flags everywhere." And the cop looks, and it's all on camera. The cop looks at the guy and goes, "There are more of them than there are of us, okay? Try not to make trouble." Oh my God, right? So that is, I think, what we're saying. with Macron and with Starmer and everybody else, because those people didn't say we were going to recognize Palestine because of, once the hostages are free. They said it regardless of the Israelis being freed. And they said it regardless of anything else. It's just pure moral bankruptcy, basically. And so everything they're doing was just managing their own hostage situation. We will capitulate. We will do whatever is necessary. Please don't take us over quite yet. Please don't kick me out of office. Please don't jihad us all and cut all our heads off if we don't convert. Please give us a moment. We'll throw the Jews under the bus for you, okay?
That's the greatest thing my mother taught me growing up, and I just want to end it. My mother growing up, I love her. I love my mother, and I love my father who helped with some of this content. Is my mother? I was in second grade, and I was in a school that taught Yiddish, which is sort of a German. It's a dialect. It's a bunch of different things, right? It literally would mean Jewish, right? But it's a separate language. And they were teaching them that and me that. And my mother pulled me out of the school because she wanted me to learn Hebrew. And she said, and I was in second grade, and my mother, first generation, obviously, most of her family slaughtered and annihilated most of my family. And she said to me, if we ever need to run somewhere, we're not running to Germany. We're running to Israel, so you need to learn Hebrew. And she taught me not to be a victim. And she taught me not to identify with the Holocaust, to know about it, but not identify with it. And there's a big difference. And people have to stop identifying can't identify with those hostages. I have to pray that they make it home safely, and I have to pray that the Israeli government, with the help of America, not foot soldiers, is able to get them back safely. Go on, but at no point can I be held in fear. I'm not going to live in fear. I live in faith.
I think it's beautifully said. And I think it's really important for people to understand that doesn't mean that you don't have empathy, and it doesn't mean that you don't sympathize, and it doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you don't want those people home. It doesn't mean that you don't feel a pang of pain and anger when you see videos like what was just released. It just means that you do not allow yourself to make decisions from a place of being a captive. And that is a big difference. It's the same reason why I, as a filmmaker, I am very focused on telling Jewish and Israeli stories. But the one thing I am absolutely dead set on is that I don't want to tell stories of Jews and Israelis as victims. I want to tell stories that people haven't heard, because I get that every couple of years there's a Holocaust movie and it's very sad. And like the book says, people love dead Jews, right? Spielberg, God bless him as a filmmaker, but Spielberg's Shoah Foundation, as we've talked about in the past, is basically a collection of dead Jew stories. And while it's important to keep that and important to remember that, and it is something that can be used for education, it is about time that we tell the stories of living and of life and of heroism and of triumph. And those stories cannot be told if we feel like we are also in the tunnels on a regular basis. We cannot put ourselves in that position. And it's dangerous to do so, because then we are making decisions that put us behind the eight ball in terms of strategy, in terms of what's happening politically, in terms of what's happening on a geopolitical scale. And the decision that Netanyahu just made now to say, we're taking the whole thing over. We're going to decimate that place. We're going to, whatever, if you want to call it occupy, call it occupy. If you want to call it taking back, we're going to call it taking back. But one way or the other, we're going to flatten Gaza, because enough time has gone by. And if you believe there is a genocide there, ask yourself this question. In history, and I mean any other time, give me even one. We'll have a conversation about it on Truth Social. We'll have fun. Okay. Even one time in history where a genocide occurred and the people being genocided have the power to stop it anytime they want and choose not to. If you can give me that answer, please, let's have a conversation.
Brilliantly said. And just wanted to end with this because it's sort of an interesting story with Spielberg, because that's always been my gripe, has been he it's nothing he enjoyed. I mean, that's his wheelhouse, is writing about dead Jews. And the one time he decided to make a movie about the Munich games, right? Munich, he did the whole moral relativism. And I was talking about Munich, and I said, God, I hated that movie. And the guy next to me, he was in it. And I don't want to say his name or anything, and you know who it is. And
I do.
he said, "No, I hated it too." And I was like, "Oh, thank God!" And because I'm Judah, put foot in mouth.
That's what happens when you have Tony Kushner. If you are truly an advocate for Israel and truly an advocate for Judaism, you do not have Tony Kushner as your collaborator. Tony Kushner has now written
Good word.
several, collaborator with a K. Tony Kushner has now written several movies, including West Side Story and others, and Munich for Steven Spielberg. Tony Kushner, just so all of you are aware, is publicly not just critical of Israeli governmental policies, but an outright anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and he's Jewish, so that is a self-hating Jew, anti-Zionist. There is a group called JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, which is not Jewish, not our voice, and certainly not for peace. It's financed by the same group that SJP is financed by, Students for Justice in Palestine, which is basically a Hamas front. And he is on the board of JVP. So just so you understand why, when you watch Munich and the Israelis who are going after the murderers, the terrorists, then have all these moral, oh, I feel bad for getting revenge and all. That's why, because the whole point of Tony Kushner's script is that the Jews should feel bad about taking revenge and about fighting back, and they should just lay down and die, which is what the world keeps asking us to do. And guess what? Second world, we don't do that.
Well done and well said. And just again, it's really important that when situations occur, like we're witnessing in Israel, that situations that will eventually occur in America, is that we find people to talk to. And that's why we're here. We're blessed. I'm blessed that I have people like Golan and the Dude and other people in my life, my parents, obviously Ben Stein, to talk to about these things, because they're scary things to talk about. I don't want people to be scared, and I hope that's the biggest message anybody could get out of this episode today. And if you disagree with us on the Stockholm Syndrome, it's on you. It's my brilliant idea. Anywho, it's our brilliant idea. We're
That's right.
collaborators.
I do have one message I have to put out to a group of people who are listening in the UAE. Okay, and we talked about the UAE. We love what they're doing over there, kicking out the Muslim Brotherhood and being kind of a pro-West Arab country. For Jose and Beck in the UAE, if you're listening, we love you. We miss you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being who you are.
And thank you for everybody that's been listening all across the world. Thank you for everybody. Thank you. Apple Podcasts is where you can find us. Obviously, you can find us on Spotify. You could find us on YouTube at The Daily Cheat Sheet. You can find us on Substack at The Daily Cheat Sheet. You can find us on Instagram at The Daily Cheat Sheet. And on X, you can find us at TD Cheat Sheet. And of course, you can find us on Truth Social, The Daily Cheat Sheet. You could also find us at Judah Friedman. But that you can't find you under Golan Ramraz. It's
film artist. They won't let me change my username.
And so I want to thank everybody from the bottom of our hearts. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.